Welcome to today's episode of Building Your First Home. Today we're excited to have Daniel Perri on the show. Daniel is a key figure at AHB Group, Victoria's second largest builder, responsible for delivering around 2,500 homes each year. With over a decade of experience in the property industry and 16 years as a property investor, he has a wealth of knowledge, having run a project marketing business focused on helping buyers enter the investment property market. Daniel joined AHB in 2016 and now manages several project marketing companies, helping them grow from a builder's perspective. Daniel will provide insights to our listeners about the pre-site process when building your home and to share some details around exciting new products entering the build marketplace that will create opportunities for first home buyers to enter the market sooner. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel.
Thanks, boys. Thanks for having me.
So, Daniel, 2,500 homes a year, that's quite a few builds AHB are doing. How many of those clients would you be involved with each year?
I've been there since, like Justin said, 2016. So since then, I've built myself quite a decent project marketing base. I've got several highly functioning marketing groups. Last financial year, I did 343 sales I assisted them getting 343 sales. And it just seems to be growing and growing. I think despite what a lot of people think about the Victorian market, it's more consistent now than it ever was.
Yeah, agreed.
Being involved in 343 builds a year, you'd have a pretty comprehensive understanding then about what's involved in building a home.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. I want to get from your experience and from a builder's perspective, specifically working with Turnkey Building Group, have you seen an improved customer journey?
Definitely. And like you said earlier, I had my own marketing business way back when, and we prided ourselves on customer service and the follow through. But I just feel like at the moment, with the way things are going and how big the market and the population is getting in Victoria, customer service is absolutely key.
Yeah, for sure.
I must take my hat off to you guys, because by far you guys stand out the most out of most marketers. And I think it's the most important, because I think the byproduct of a good service will be a sale, and it's not like you guys are going out there looking for a sale, but you're going out there to help clients.
That's right. Yeah.
And that customer service just speaks volumes to clients.
I mean, I guess ultimately every builder wants to have happy clients, but building is a very big process. It has a lot of people involved. How many people roughly would you see involved in one build, do you think?
Oof, geez, that's a good one. I guess from a contractual perspective, you've probably got 2 administrators working your jobs as well as preparing your contracts. To get through the actual pre-construction process, which we'll go through soon, you've got multiple people from different areas, even externally, external business helping.
I looked it up before, and I think subcontractors to build a new home, there's about 22 different companies involved.
Exactly. Not just the admin process, but the construction process, huge. You're probably about 50.
Yeah, I'd probably
You'd be
say
close
that's
to
about
50.
right.
Yeah.
And I guess the reality is in a lot of builds, you've got that many people involved and they've all got their individual jobs to do. I guess one of the main benefits of dealing with an external company who's managing the client is that company's focus is on the client, while the building company's team focus on the build, the admin, all the work that needs to be done in the background.
It's imperative. And I've seen it before. I've seen a lot of builders try to do their project marketing internally, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I think it's best for builders to do what they're amazing at, and it's best for guys like yourselves to do what you guys are amazing at.
Yeah.
And is that customer centricity, the education piece as well. Mm-hmm. I think with builders, we can be you can sometimes assume they know the process because it's just second nature to us, whereas it's good to have the relief of you project marketers understanding what it takes for the clientele to understand and go through that process.
I think that's
smoothly.
something we speak to a lot of our customers about, that when they're dealing directly with the builder often explains things in a way that obviously makes sense to the builder and leaves the customer thinking like, I don't know what they're talking about. So we can kind of take the builder jargon and explain it to them in a easily digestible way that they can fully understand what's actually going on.
Massive. That's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And that's why you guys are so successful.
That's what we like to hear. So touching on the pre-site process, so obviously there's a lot involved to get a job to site. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of what that pre-site process looks like?
Sure. So I guess from the point you guys have educated the client wishes to proceed to contracts. Once you guys send us the expression of interest, we will obviously go through the contract process. We will go through the deposit and finance process, which you guys tend to help your clients with the finance perspective.
Yep.
From there, we need to organise contract drawings. We need to wait for the land to settle.
Yep.
Now, once that all happens and once that's all in play, that's when all the fun begins for the permit.
Yeah.
So we got to order the soil and survey testing. You need to reach out to all the councils the council in that area to request utilities such as water or electricity. Those are the pain points that us builders are finding at the moment.
Yeah.
That can take some time because councils are just completely backed up.
And
Yeah.
obviously, that pain point is the time delays, essentially, that it's taking for councils to get the documents to you.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
until you receive these documents, the next part of that process can't continue.
Exactly. And to be honest, that was mainly triggered by the last government incentive, the new home buyer. So sales has flooded right in and us builders are still quite catching up.
Yeah.
And so, no, more importantly, the councils are still catching up as well. So that's that perspective. After that, depending on the client, sometimes they tend to go through, and I know your clients do, the gallery process where it's a homemaker centre. They get to go see, pick colours, pick upgrades. We need to wait till all that's done in order to complete your working drawings. Once the working drawings are done, we need to actually request the developer approval of those drawings and the colours and everything the client's selected.
So we had Lorraine on last week and we were talking about design guidelines and we explained to the listeners what that means. So they understand that there's a bit involved with actually what the builder needs to comply to actually get that developer approval. So it's not as straightforward.
Exactly. And sometimes they can be quite backed up as well. So getting that developer approval back might take a couple of weeks. Once that's done, we need to get the engineering reports from the external engineering company, and then we have to request insurance on the actual job. We then get the building permit. Now, once we get the building permit, that's when it goes through the estimating process and we start to order every single material of the house. From there. So it does take some time. There's a lot of moving parts to that process, and like you said, a lot of people involved.
As a client, let's say I sign up for a build, I'm in a rush to get to site. Is there any part of that process I can make quicker or the builder can make quicker in any way?
We are constantly looking at this process to try and make it quicker, and if we could, we definitely would. Yes and no. It really does depend on the amount of changes to a job. But to be honest, that's probably a 5% chance we might be able to do that. 95% of the chance you need to let it run through that process. And if you do try and push the builder and corners get cut, it can slow the process down and drop you back a couple of steps as well.
I've definitely seen that. You really can't cut any corners. And I explained to some people, because a lot of the perception is that it's the building permit that actually takes a long time to get approved. But the way I explain is the builder basically puts together all the documentation required before they submit that permit. When they submit it, it's often only a couple of days or a week. That's not the lengthy process. It's everything else involved leading up to that point, which is all the things you just discussed, and the amount of third-party companies involved in this. It's not always the builder taking too long to get the job to site. There's so many working parts.
And that's the thing. When a buyer sometimes really gets educated on this process, they start to realise, well, actually, I don't want to rush that.
No.
I need it to be compliant. I need it to be up to Australian standards. I need the builder to make sure they're doing the right thing.
That's true.
And sometimes people can get frustrated at the builder, but you don't want us to rush that process.
No, just like you don't want to rush the build on site.
Exactly.
I think also what a lot of clients forget is once they're on site, you have a site supervisor managing the build. And that site supervisor is working to plans and specifications that have been finalised in that pre-site process. If they're wrong, the build will be wrong.
Well said.
And from the client's point of view, there's really no leg to stand on there because that documentation should have been thoroughly checked and completed. Rushing the process is only going to increase the chance that you've got errors in that documentation,
well said.
essentially.
100% correct.
Yeah.
And then things just need to go back. They take a step back to take the 2 steps forward, and that's what can add delays. So it's better to just, like you said, get the plans correct at the start, get all the documentation required, then submit for developer approval, permits and things like that when it's all compiled together.
But like you said, that step back is weeks.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you go back, not to the bottom of the pile, I won't say, but you have to understand in a building company, you're a big machine turning.
Yeah.
And as soon as there's a clog that, isn't turning the right way and it takes a couple of step backs, it can really affect the flow on.
Well, there's, like we just said, 2,500 homes a year.
Exactly.
That's a lot of jobs ready to take the next step. And if one needs to go back, that might mean 5 jump in front.
That's right.
And I think that's what a lot of people need to sort of get their head around with how much work is actually involved.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Why then would a builder take on so much work?
I think because once you get the process down pat and you've got the right team in place, and let's be honest, and I feel bad for them, but a lot of builders have gone under in the last couple of years. Obviously, yes, COVID, financial restraints with interest rate rises, but a lot of processes weren't in place with some of these smaller guys effectively enough like ours to be able to weather the storm and make sure jobs get out. Because a lot of things bottlenecked in the permit process. They couldn't get jobs out effectively. And if you can't get jobs out, no invoices get paid.
That's right.
No money comes in.
When does the builder get paid?
During construction.
They're not making anything until that home starts construction. And that is
technically pretty much frame stage, I reckon.
Is the first time a builder is seeing any profit off a build?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I do actually explain that to a lot of people, that everyone is actually working toward the same goal. The builder wants the home to start just as fast as the customer wants to and to be completed, obviously, as well. But there's just steps involved that need to be taken.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Basically, as much as it's costing, the client money to hold the land in that time, it's also costing the builder money in the sense that they're outlaying their own money to get to that point in time. And I guess the other factor that we need to take into account is the longer it actually takes a builder to start construction, the cost of that build goes up, but that cost is not passed on to a client. That's absorbed by a builder.
That's right.
So it's in the builder's best interest also to get things to site as soon as they can.
Absolutely.
But in doing that, still, they still want to be thorough and make sure.
We're to cross the T's and dot the I's,
correct.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
We've touched on the pre-site process. Obviously, then the home goes to construction. We don't need to go through the full details of this, but there's obviously the on-site stages of a build. Can you just briefly touch on what they are?
Not a problem. So from a high level, once the job gets the permit and finishes estimating, then obviously the slab is what comes next. But there's a lot of work that goes into the slab. People think that
just pour the concrete down on the dirt.
Your job's being sent to construction. They ring the next day, is the slab done? That doesn't quite work like that. We need to scrape the site. We need to start preparing the site. We need to start putting fencing up. We need to start, there's a lot of moving parts that it can take, 2-3 weeks for the slab to go down. But once that slab goes down, you maneuver into frame stage, you maneuver into lockup stage, fixed stage, final stage, and then the house is complete.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing too, what you were saying there, where, your first stage is slab stage. So a client thinks that means slab goes down. But actually there's a lot of steps that are involved in slab stage. And I guess it's important to acknowledge that those names of each stage don't necessarily only correlate to what the name is. There's a lot of steps that happen within that stage.
Absolutely.
Well, a very common one that we get is the lock-up stage. You would think that would mean the house is locked up. That's not always the case.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's true.
And I guess for a client, they can refer to their build contract if they want to understand what work is actually included in each stage.
Definitely. And the contract holds all information. It's amazing how many queries you'll get. And look, I get it, because a lot of buyers will send their contracts to a lawyer to review. And as long as that lawyer says green light, they're okay. But a lot of the information they need to know is always stipulated in the contracts. And to Jordan's point, it actually literally breaks down every single stage in the progress page of
Something
the
we
contracts.
do like to do as a business is run through that contract with our clients from start to finish. But in saying that, there's 150 pages. It's quite a long, lengthy appointment. People do often forget. And it's not really the most exciting part of your process. No. You want to see the house built. You don't really care about reading your contract. So,
For sure.
Yeah.
I think the other important thing to acknowledge, and AHB Group use HIA building contracts, as do a lot of builders in Victoria. You don't actually write that contract.
No.
That's written by the HIA. And that obviously means that it's written in a way that protects both the client and the builder and ensures it's a sort of fair transaction that's taking place.
It is, and that's actually very well said too. So the HIA somewhat regulate how contracts are stipulated in terms of, like you said, protecting both parties. And that way it remains unbiased. So it's not the builder trying to take advantage, like a lot of people tend to point the finger at. It's being regulated to the point where both parties can actually sign that contract feeling comfortable. But of course, builders can always add special conditions.
Yes,
of course. But obviously those special conditions are usually input because of changing times, changing materials. COVID especially was a situation there. But, things are starting to go back to normal now, which is great.
Even some of the examples of a special condition that we note in the AHB contract is, for example, a client isn't able to attend a site without a member of staff.
Yeah.
Obviously, for obvious reasons, if they trip over and a nail goes through their hand, they can't sue the builder.
That's true.
So a lot of the special conditions are actually quite trivial when you read through them, but they need to be there for obvious reasons as well.
Yes.
I guess the HIA also have to write that contract in a way that covers a variety of different builds. So sometimes the special conditions help clarify for these builds that are relevant to our business, this is how we're going to interpret what's in this HIA document.
Very true. It's business specific. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll go through it, make it very easy for our customers. So that's good.
You do.
So obviously, a lot of people entering the market, considering building their first home, might look like you meet someone, you get in a relationship, you build your first home, you start a family. I guess that's like the traditional way of looking at it. We understand now for affordability, there's a number of new ways that first home builders can actually enter the market. Rent vesting is one of those.
Huge.
Can we touch a little bit on what rent vesting is?
So rent vesting is when you're renting. So you go with a partner, you start to have a dual income coming in. Then obviously it's a bit easier to start saving or come up with a deposit.
Yep.
Rent vesting is when you're renting your own property with your partner, or even if your own, you can do it on your own. And you look at purchasing an investment property. You're purchasing that investment property in order for it to grow in capital value, in order to borrow off that and then buy the dream home.
Yeah. So a lot of information about rent vesting, people are looking in regional areas because there's high growth and there's a large demand for renters in those areas.
Very true, yep. So regional's really taken off since COVID, like massively, to the point where there's a lot of federal government spending in certain areas. Train stations are going up, shopping centres are going up because populations are dramatically increasing.
Yeah.
You look at your Gippsland, your Bendigos, your Sheppartons, your Benallas, and even all the way in Colac as well, Geelong way. Those areas are starting to fire up because of their rental returns, and you can get up to 6, 7, 8% rental return, whereas Melbourne Metropolitan, you're pretty much hovering just under 4%.
And so really the concept of rent vesting is you're going to buy a property in an area that you don't necessarily want to live in, while you can rent in an area that you do want to live in. But the property that you've purchased as your rent vesting or your investment property is going to appreciate in value and essentially make it easier for you to maybe build your second home or go and build your dream home.
Definitely. And I mean, people are starting to get very creative with certain products like co-living.
Yeah.
So co-living are rooming houses that you're living in and renting out the other bedrooms. You don't necessarily have to be living in it either.
Yep.
And for example, we've got 5-bedroom products that you can rent out, and statistically it's showing you can get $300 per room.
Great.
Now, if you had a house and you were renting that out entirely, you won't be getting $1,500 a week.
No. So they're homes that would say they'd have 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms?
Yep, 5. So every bedroom has its own ensuite and walk-in robe.
Yep.
There's a communal bathroom as well, and obviously a communal area, which is the family and living area. Each room has keypad entry. The front door has keypad entry. Everyone's got their own little locker, pantry broken down with their own key. Like, it's starting to get very creative in terms of how people can get rental return.
These just look like normal houses.
Completely normal houses. Yep.
So that would be a great option for somebody if they were considering rent vesting, because you've got this property that's 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom, but generating a much higher level of rental return.
Much higher level of rental return. And some people might think, but gee, what about the property managers? They're all over it.
Yeah,
they actually love it, because isn't it easier to just, market to get 5 or 6 tenants in the one house versus being all over Melbourne Metropolitan?
So there's companies that will assist in managing that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, right.
Definitely.
I think the important thing that we didn't touch on with rent vesting as well is the reason a lot of these clients are doing rent vesting is, yes, one, it could be that they can't afford a property in the area they want to live in. The other reason is often that they can afford a property, but is that property type the right sort of property they should be putting money into? So I'll openly say I don't think buying newly built apartments is a very good investment for a client. If you're looking at purchasing in an inner city area and your budget might be $800,000, it's not going to get you much more than an off-the-plan apartment.
Yep.
But really, are you going to see a return on that? No. So take the $800,000, put that into a property like this co-living type property where it generates a good rental income, and then divert that rental income to renting an apartment in the city where you're comfortable living and want to live at that time.
Nice. And be very creative about it as well. Strategic, not so much creative, but strategic. So talking to people like yourselves, and like you look in the regional areas, like I was saying, and all these hospitals are going up. If you put a co-living property near a hospital, you don't think you're going to get nurses and doctors that are flying in, flying out, or, that's becoming a really interesting concept, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
That is important too. You can't just take a 4 or 5 bedroom house, put it anywhere and expect that 4 or 5 people want to rent each room. It is something that you really do need to, either do the research on yourself if you've got the time, or speak to somebody who's an expert in that area and can help advise where the best locations might be, and you're actually going to realise the returns you're expecting from that sort of property.
Correct.
We often touch on the importance of looking in master plan communities for these obvious reasons. They've got all the infrastructure. Those type of communities would be great for co-living type product because they're close to all the amenities that people are going to want.
Yep.
Or major employment locations, like you said before, like, for example, a hospital where you might have nurses who are required to do work or doctors who need to do work in regional areas for a specified time. Do they need a whole house? Not really. So, having this co-living type product they can rent is a perfect solution while they're at work throughout the week.
Yep. And if they do live quite far as well, I'd rather pay $300 a week and stay close versus having to drive 2 hours all day every day.
Yeah.
But we're finding a lot of people are focused on things like that.
And if it's only for a limited time, they're happy to rent a room in a house while they're doing their 12 months in the regional areas.
And especially the vendor doesn't mind, because if you can imagine, just say your loan repayment is roughly $3,000 per month.
Yeah.
But you've got 5 rooms paying $300 per week. That's $1,200 a month each. Mm-hmm. If you don't rent out all 5 rooms, you've only got 3 or 4 rented out. Your loan's still covered with still a profit.
Yeah.
So,
and would that property, in your opinion, still have capital growth?
Oh, like I said before, strategically, depending on where you put it. But yes, it will. Definitely.
I guess ultimately it is a home that can be used as a family home too if you were to resell it in the future. And a lot of families out there now actually are looking for these homes with multiple ensuite bedrooms. They've got relatives overseas who come and stay. They've got older children who might be at home for longer because they can't afford to buy immediately or whatever the case might be.
Very true. Yep.
Yeah, so not only do you have your capital growth, but you've got this high level of rental income that can actually increase your yearly earnings, which will actually increase your borrowing capacity, that may help you get into the market to your dream home sooner.
Exactly. Yep. Well said.
I guess the other option where co-living could be really beneficial is you're taking a first home buyer who actually is wanting to live in an area where they can build a new home. But rather than just build a home for themselves to live in, if they build a co-living product, that would house them, but they could then use it to actually generate rental income from the other 2 or 3 rooms so that their mortgage repayments are reduced. So they're in their own home, they're in the market, but they've got someone contributing towards that. And that could be friends or family that they're living with. It could also just be other tenants that they're renting to.
Yep, exactly.
Now, I have seen some of these AHB designs that are coming out and they look very impressive. You don't need a huge block of land. The overall initial outlay to build something like this is not enormous if you're looking in a regional area. Obviously, land prices are a lot lower than they are in metro regions.
They're much more cost effective.
They look very impressive.
Yeah, they do. The standard block requirement really for co-living of our products is just 32 metres deep. It can be 12 and a half, 14, 16 metre frontage.
Yeah.
But those are the blocks that, you're paying maybe 180 to 250 depending on the regional area.
That's the difference of a metro that might be 500,000 for that
100%.
block. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So that's why we're talking about doing this in a regional location, because your initial outlay is substantially less.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So you're obviously increasing and bettering your return.
Yeah.
And like Jordan said, that money you're putting towards, the deposit for the house in the city, or, the options are unlimited depending on how you structure things. So that's what I've always told people when I was educating people in property. Property as an investment perspective is different to when you're an owner-occupier. You don't have to get so emotional about it. You just be strategic about what it's for, where you're putting it, and what returns you're going to get.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's just an option.
Yeah.
Do I keep it? Do I flip it? Do I keep renting it? Look, there's so many options that you can speak to guys like yourselves about that can educate clients through that journey.
For sure. Yeah, it is easy for people to get emotionally involved because of how much money you're spending, but you somewhat need to remove that emotion and look at it as essentially a business activity.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've obviously got a lot of experience in your own personal property investment. Can you speak us through a little bit about your journey and how you got into that?
Sure. So my old man reluctantly pushed me into my first investment property. I think it was 2007 or 2008, around the GFC actually.
Yeah.
I got into the property market.
Pre-GFC?
Just before GFC
Right,
kicked in.
yeah.
So my interest rates went from, I think then it was 6% up to 12%. Freaked out, and he was calm. He was like, don't worry, we're going to weather the storm. You can afford it. Within 6 to 8 months, it sort of came back down, and that property was probably one of the best properties I ever got. It was near the Eastern Freeway, just before the Eastern Freeway went in.
Yeah.
Right.
But we knew the Eastern Freeway was coming, so once that developed, I saw huge capital growth.
Yeah.
I did a renovation. I did my first reno on it.
Yep.
And flipped it for a very, very healthy return. And that sort of sparked the interest. And from there, I've done one in Coburg. I'm currently building at the moment in Ballarat. I've done several builds and flips in Ballarat as well, with a few more to come.
Yep.
So it's been an interesting journey, and I've actually really thoroughly enjoyed it, especially once I started working for the builder and understanding how that process can work, it became even better.
I think you said something really interesting there, which I often talk about, which is I always recommend to anyone purchasing their first home that in some capacity they add value to that property. Don't go and buy something brand new built. Don't go and buy something that's already renovated. Either you want to be building a home or you want to be renovating a home.
Yep.
You renovated that property.
Don't buy the nicest house in the street.
Don't buy the
That's
nicest.
right.
Yeah,
Buy the worst house on the best street.
that's right. The market's going to make some of the money for you, but you can make the rest by adding that value.
That's so true.
The renovating process on your first home, how did you find that?
I won't lie, it was physically and a little bit emotionally taxing, but I didn't plan as well as I would now. So once you go through that, then you realize what order and how to do it and be a bit more savvy about the trades that you select.
Yeah.
When I did the next one, because we renovated Coburg before we sold that, piece of cake.
Yeah.
Piece of cake. I actually really enjoyed it, to be honest.
I think once you start, like we've spoken to a lot of different people already with this podcast, and everyone that gets into it themselves does get some level of like addiction to it.
When you sit back and you think about what it looked like before and now, you're very
of what
you're
you've
very happy with
created,
yourself.
and then you're even happier when you sell it.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
But I guess as you go through each property and you've got more financial backing, that process becomes a bit easier as well.
That's true.
Because I guess it's very cash and time intensive doing a renovation in some
That's
cases.
a very good point, and I think that's where people get scared of getting in, but you just got to put your foot in.
Yeah.
Nothing is as scary as what it seems.
Yeah.
It's all in your head.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah.
But if you go in with the right team around you, getting the right advice from the right people,
Yeah.
it becomes a really somewhat addictive or educating process.
Yeah.
And then one day you can just do it on your own, and that's where I honestly think the real money is.
Yeah, for sure.
These days.
Well, it's a good supplement to somebody else's income or, their day-to-day job if they've got this investment property or they've got something they're doing in the background. It's additional income.
Exactly.
What do you find an easier way of making money now? Renovating or building?
Building.
Building.
Definitely building.
Because
if you know what to look for in terms of lands and you get a decent price and you're working with a good builder and you get that done, if it's in the right area and you have the right plan. So am I building to flip it?
Yep.
That's depending on the market. So market's very cyclical.
Yep.
So I guess building to flip was so advantageous a year and a half ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So after COVID, things went crazy. Before COVID
Well, there
as
was
well.
a big demand for newly built properties, people that don't want to go through the building process because it seems overwhelming. They want these brand new properties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas now, the way the market is and things have slowed down because of interest rates, which touch wood, I think they're going to start coming down next year. Now is when you get the deals and the lands.
Yeah.
So at the moment, you're buying your lands, you're building your house on it with the intention to rent it.
Yeah.
Because when interest rates start to go down, what happens to property value? Starts
Increases.
to go up.
Yes.
So it's all about timing and knowing what the right strategy is depending on the market.
So your personal strategy in this moment in the market would be to actually go out and acquire land right now,
I think so, yes.
based on the fact that realistically, this is probably the best price we're going to see land at, within the next few years at least.
I believe so. But not just buy land, but build on it straight away if
Absolutely,
you can.
yeah, of
Because
course.
there's an abundance of titled land.
Yeah.
Yes.
If your house is built before interest rates start coming down next year, happy days.
We spoke about this with Lorraine last week. Obviously, titled stock, developers don't like holding titled stock. So there's often rebates or discounts and you can get a good deal.
Definitely.
It also means your home can start construction a lot faster and
Yep.
you can obviously start generating that return.
I
Very
also
true.
think though, titled stock, once that sells, you go to untitled stock. And if the market's heating up and there's only untitled stock, you're going to see the price across the board start increasing as well.
That's a good point.
So even for those buyers who are maybe looking at it and they're saying, well, I'm not really in a position right now to build my home, but I do have some deposit, a really good option for them is to actually look at securing a package now while pricing is reasonable, putting down those initial deposits, and then using the time while they wait for their land title to come through to actually continue to save and get in that position where they're ready for the build.
That's a very good point because by the time that block title's perhaps end of next year, maybe even later, by the time they build that house, you're already going to have maybe 50 plus equity in it.
Correct. And I think that's a strategy too many buyers don't take advantage of, where they could take advantage of it just because they don't realize it's an option for them.
Yep. Yep.
Well, and I know we've personally helped a lot of clients in that same situation that have come in and said, I'm not actually ready yet because I don't have the deposit saved. And we've actually found alternative ways of helping them enter with a low deposit, whether we put them on some sort of payment plan or we assist them with a savings strategy or whatever we do. But we've actually helped so many people enter the market when essentially they weren't quite ready deposit-wise.
That's a very good touch to do that. I like to just the amount of lives you're changing by doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of Australians that don't understand the property market are born and raised. You have your family, buy your house, pay that house off as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But they don't realise the equity in that is what's going to help them grow wealth.
And the time that people say, I might need 12 months to save that deposit, they might save $15,000 in 12 months with the cost of living, but the value of that land and the build increases so much more that $15,000 that they've saved, they're nowhere near where they need to be again. Like the goalposts just keep moving. So if we can actually help them put a stop on it, buy something at today's value, but they don't settle on it for 12 to 18 months, we've helped a lot of people that way, which has been really good.
Nice.
I guess everyone's concern is the increasing price of housing. And that's only a problem for you as long as you don't have a house. As soon as you've committed to something and you've locked in that property, whether or not you're living in it for now, whether or not it's even built, as long as you've locked that price in, any movement in the market upwards is only to your benefit at that point.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I guess that's also how a lot of people end up being able to get into their home they ultimately want to live in. They can't save a deposit of 20% for that home, but they can use another property to generate equity and then to cash out on that equity and use that to be the deposit on the property they want to live in.
Completely agree. That's the sort of stuff people should want to pull in tight for and have it as an expense. That's an asset. If that's going to be growing, and that's the thing, people don't see their bank account constantly growing and they forget, is that actually making me money or not? Then you get it evaluated, then all of a sudden it's up by 100 grand. Can you borrow back on that money? Of course you can. And then you started the process over again.
It is a real sort of mental game where you can't physically see that money in your bank. So you feel like every month that you're paying your mortgage that you're actually losing money. You're not though.
And it's funny, everyone will go through that for the first one. Then after that, they're like, nah, now I get it.
How much money can I borrow?
Instead of putting that money in a savings account generating near no income realistically, you're putting that into a savings account that is your mortgage on a property that has high percentage returns on it. So essentially it's the best bank account you could ever have. Putting money into your mortgage.
So true. And I think that the old adage was, property doubles every 10 to 12 years depending on where it is.
Yeah.
Some of these regional areas are destined to double in 5.
Yeah.
Because they're just the government's funneling population that way.
Well, it's easier to kind of look at the strategy and the major developers that are going out into these regional areas. They wouldn't go and buy these huge parcels if they didn't realise, what they were going to create that would add value.
That's a good point. Yeah,
it's always a good sign.
Definitely. So there's lots of opportunity at the moment, which is exciting.
Yeah, for sure. If you could give the listeners some advice that you could give to yourself before you either started property investing or getting in the industry, what would that be?
That's a good question.
Knowing what you know now.
Knowing what I know now, I wish I started earlier. I was trying to find something else that didn't sound cliche.
But I think that's it's usually the common answer.
True, right?
Yeah.
Like I said before, the first one's the hardest.
Yeah.
Only because you think it is.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
But my advice would be, if you are going to get into the property market, which I hope you do, because honestly I can say, and I think you guys can agree, that that's the one way to build wealth in this country.
100%.
And we are in a very lucky country despite what a lot of people think, but you need to have the right team around you if you don't understand property. And there's, lucky enough, and I'll give you guys the crops for you, there's lucky enough there's guys like you out there that, like you said, Justin, you help people achieve their deposit if they don't think they can. You put them on payment plans. Right. You walk them through the process. You guys have the rights reach in terms of the right land developers, the right builders. If I had that back then, geez, I wish I could have probably done it better.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
I think that is a really good point too. Most investments people make in their life, they don't do without the advice of a professional. And I think property is very much the same, where too many people think they can go out and they just choose a property they like based on what they can spend, but they don't actually think of the bigger picture and what are my longer term property goals?
Yes.
How am I going to get there? Is property something I'm building wealth through? Is property something that will help me retire?
Create the plan.
Even if that's 50 years from now. But to get that right from the start, talk to a professional before you buy anything and get that advice and structure your property portfolio initially to give you those returns.
That's the perfect answer right there. It's so true.
Right.
Like the plan.
Yeah.
If you have a professional to help you create what plan it is based on what lifestyle you want later.
Yeah. I think that's a good piece of advice, is to think about what you want later. We've spoken about it before with Tony, like short-term gratitude. A lot of first home buyers want their ultimate property now. They don't really want to sort of work to it. But there is ways, like you don't have to have a huge income to be able to reach your goals and get to that ideal or dream home. You can, stepping stones, and you can rentvest your first property, or you could build something in a regional area and flip it in a few years. There's so many different things we can do. It's just what's going to be the best one for you.
And a lot of people are already sitting on the ability to do it. They just don't know it.
Yeah, that's a common one that we get. It's like, I don't think we're in the right position. They've actually got a good deposit. They've got a good income. They could service it.
Half their mortgage is paid off. There's equity there already.
They just don't really understand it, which is fine. You don't get taught any of this in school. No one really readily gives you this information. You can't Google it. You can't ask ChatGPT. You've got to sit with professionals and go through this.
No, for sure.
Falling into that mistake of looking at maybe properties where you want to live and saying, well, I can't afford to buy. Do you need to live in your first property? The answer is no. You can invest in property. You can be in the market and you can still be living where you want to be living. And I think a lot of people don't take that into account, that there are other ways to be in property without needing to be living in a property.
That's very well said. Because ultimately, it's about lifestyle. Once you get older and you work out what lifestyle do I want to have now? What lifestyle I want to have lifestyle in 5 years, 10 years?
And that can change.
What vehicles do I need to get me there? And that is property. So you can rent in the city if you prefer the city life, whilst being strategic about maybe buying in regional or buying in Berwick or Clyde.
Yeah.
As long as it's a game plan that's going to ultimately give you what lifestyle you want later.
Yeah. Well, you could hypothetically continue to build and never live in these homes that you build, have a portfolio out there, and you could live interstate. You could go travel. You can do whatever you want.
I've got clients interstate and overseas that have never seen their properties ever.
And they're just generating an income. Yeah.
Well, you have a property manager who looks after the property. You don't need to drive past and look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another mistake people make. Actually, I'd recommend don't drive past and look at it all the time.
It's probably not going to look what you want it to look like.
Or and have clients going, I don't like those tiles. I don't like those curtains. But you're not living there.
No.
You know what I mean? And you changing and you spending more money on those curtains and tiles is going to get you more rent back.
Yeah, that's
This is an opportunity just to make money on rent.
Yeah, and that's where like people like ourselves can actually advise on the exact right inclusions that you need to put in a home to generate the maximum return without overspending. That sort of stuff you can't figure out yourself either.
Exactly.
It's just from experience.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what you're saying, people need to be ready to take that first step, commit to doing it, even though it might seem scary at first. Ultimately, after people take that first step, they generally don't look back and regret those steps they've taken. But in saying that, also before taking the step, plan it properly.
Exactly.
Don't step into anything and think it's going to work because it's a property. It needs to be the right property as well.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Plan, have the right team.
Yeah.
If you're reluctant in wanting to execute, then do your due diligence.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
utilize the team that you got around you to help you with that due diligence, and then you make an informed decision. And then the rest isn't as scary as everyone thinks.
And the decisions on what you do with that property can always change too.
Definitely.
Maybe you want to move to a regional area. You can live in that property, or maybe you want to sell it and do something else. So you've got the freedom and flexibility, but you need to have that there to give yourself these choices to be able to further yourself in life.
Definitely.
Thank you, Daniel, for joining us today and sharing your insights.
Thanks
it's been
for having
very
me.
valuable. And
Appreciate it.
that's it.
We'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, lads.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Building Your First Home, brought to you by Turnkey Building Group. We hope you found our discussion insightful and feel more confident as you embark on your home building journey.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Building Your First Home on your favourite podcast platform. Also, follow us on social media at Turnkey Building Group for the latest updates and home building tips. We love hearing from our listeners, so feel free to share your thoughts, experiences, and any topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, have a great day and happy building.